1148. You don't have to tell me now, but we should talk this weekend. Julia told the table. No one mentioned that Bernie is third in his class and only attended those lectures deemed important. He has fulfilled his commitment to several people to work hard and provide them with his work. I know how hard he's worked because he was always buried in his books and not in me. That didn't come out right. 1 o'clock, 2 minutes, 7 seconds. I mean, he was always working on his studies and not being distracted by me. Grandmother said, Bernie has been an inspiration to us all in many ways. He's worked toward becoming a lawyer, and he's helped at the dealership when you've needed him. He's family and has proven it. I think Julia has another announcement, but she wants to wait. 1 hour, 2 minutes, and 24 seconds. Come on, Julia, let us in on your secret. I looked to see Julia's face blazing in embarrassment. She leaned to me, kissed my cheek, and then as she stood said, I've kept this from Bernie so that he could focus on studying, but I'm going to be showing the world now. Julia used her open hand to smooth her blouse over her belly that I had noticed had been growing. 1 o'clock, 2 minutes, 44 seconds. Bernie and I are going to be parents in about 3 months. I was so shook that I almost threw up. Holy! The woman I had continuously been with for almost 2 years is going to have our baby. I stood and said, Ladies and gentlemen, please observe the following demonstration of my love of Julia. I went to one knee and held Julia's hand. 132. We should have done this before, but it's now time for it to be done. Julia, my love, will you marry me? I reached into my dress slacks pocket and pulled out the small box that was there while 2 tears ran down Julia's face. I opened the box and Julia's eyes widened in awe. She leaned in, kissed me on the lips, and then said, Yes, Bernie Bernard Beck, I want to marry you. 1324. I placed the ring on her finger and we kissed again. We stood together embracing in a heartfelt hug that seemed to solidify our commitment. The men all gave me back slaps and congratulatory gestures while the women surrounded Julia, expressing their joy for her. Later, after an evening of celebrating, Julia asked, How long have you had that ring? I watch you so closely. 1344. When did you get it? Holding her close, I told her, I decided to propose the week we moved in here, but you kept saying we'd talk about marriage later. I bought the ring and have been carrying it around, waiting for the perfect moment. I love you so much, Julia, and I can't believe we're going to be parents. 1 hour, 4 minutes. I promise to be a good father. Julia smiled and said, And I promise to be a good wife and mother. I have a lot to learn, but I have time. Gamma says she'll help me with everything I need to know. We went to bed that night, feeling the weight of our new chapter and quietly reflecting on the future ahead of us. 1 o'clock, 4 minutes, 17 seconds. Julia asked at breakfast the next morning, When can we go down and tell Jeb and Happy? Your sister is going to be so excited, and everyone will want us to get married right away. My aunts will want a big flowery wedding, but I want something simple and uncomplicated, just you and me. 1 hour, 4 minutes, 33 seconds. I'll work on my family and you'll be in charge of yours. You know, it might be nice to have the wedding in that small church you and your family have gone to for so many years. We would find out soon because I convinced Mrs. McKinley to go with us to visit my family down in the country. I had called and talked to, and then Grandpa. He said that Julia and I could sleep on the couch and Mrs. 1 o'clock, 4 minutes, 51 seconds. McKinley could sleep in my room. I told Grandpa I think she is going to want to have her man James drive us down, so I need to find room for him. There was and then he said we'll work it out. We've been making some plans and working on them. We'll be ready if we make an effort. I had several things to do with school during this week, and most of the next one. 159. So I was limited to enjoying summer before the early summer semester. I was given assignments with a stack of books to read for the second summer period, and wondered how I was going to read that much in the time allotted. I called to find out if they were ready for us, and Grandpa said, We have all the room necessary for Mrs. 1525, McKinley's man and her maid, as well as you two. Happy is so excited that she has probably lost 10 pounds she shouldn't have. Come show her Julia's tummy, and she'll be the Happy we all know. I went to the Chevy dealership and made a deal with one of the aunts to trade my pickup in for a used Suburban that would carry all of us. 1541. The big car or truck, whatever it is, has 3 seats in it and was perfect for us. I didn't want to use grandmother's limousine since that would be too far out for that neighborhood. Our arrival on the farm was a celebration of the joining of city and country folks. Grandmother and Happy were soulmates as soon as they met. 1558. The two instantly were in the kitchen making something from both of their repertoires. James and Kay enjoyed looking around the farm and learning about various things from Sis and Bryce's almost 4-year-old. There was a new addition just off the lane road to the house. A new home had been built with the anticipation of more children, as it had 5 bedrooms, and they only had 2 kids so far. 1 hour, 6 minutes, 17 seconds. They had worked hard to finish it, and Sis had quickly furnished it so that they could move in to empty the rooms for guests. Grandma slept in my room while James and Kay each had a room, and Julia and I slept on the couch. It worked. Happy was nearly delirious that Julia was pregnant and we were getting married. 1 hour, 6 minutes, and 34 seconds, Julia had a few conversations with Happy and her gamma before they went to see the local preacher. The man was a little put off that Julia and I hadn't waited to get married before we had children, but agreed that he had married a swarm of kids fresh out of high school in June for that same reason for many years. I made a $100 donation to help make for smoother sailing. Mrs. Wakpadam, 1 hour, 6 minutes, 52 seconds. McKinley didn't want to wait and had the preacher perform the wedding in front of just our family and a couple of friends of mine. Julia's aunts and husbands drove down and stayed in local roadside cabins, normally used by fishermen. I don't think Julia or I needed the service. We were already man and wife in our minds. Julia and compared baby bumps, showing off who might be closer to having their baby. 1 hour, 7 minutes, 14 seconds was probably the winner of that one, but Julia was just as proud. I commented at the big dinner table, "I haven't been gone very long, but Bryce and have 2 kids and another on the way. This family is exploding, and Julia and I are going to join in." Grandma McKinley said, "Bernie is determined to come back here to either practice law or become the county attorney." 1735. I'm going to look for some property to build the couple a house as a wedding present. Bernie has close to 2 more years of studying to become a lawyer, so I don't have to rush. But I'll need help to find somewhere he and Julia can raise a family. Grandpa said Bernie has always been a homebody, so I think the place for him will be at the Miller place next door. 1752. It burnt down a while back, and the Millers have been gone for years. I think it's coming up at the tax sale, so I'll get it for Bernie. And you can build the kids something nice. He'll be just across that wooded stretch, and we'll always know where help is. Happy would be the happiest if they lived here, but kids often want something of their own. 189. Julia spoke up and said, "It would be good for us to have a home site, but I'd love to live right here to have and raise my baby. It's going to be a few years before Bernie is able to earn a living practicing law. He might have a few bucks saved for us to live on, but why waste it when we've been offered a great place to live?" I thought Happy was going to become speechless with happiness to have us live in the house with them. 1 hour, 8 minutes, and 29 seconds. Julia was being herself by wanting to blend in and not stand out as some self-important person. I think her gamma was the proudest. It was something she would have done. Julia gave birth to a gorgeous baby girl at Thanksgiving. I was so proud of Julia and the baby, but she said that she was disappointed it wasn't a boy for me to raise and teach. 1 hour, 8 minutes, 46 seconds. We had many talks about it while we waited the customary 6 weeks for her insides to heal up. I kept telling her it wasn't hers to decide. It was divine intervention that decided if we should be raising a little girl or boy. My 2 remaining years of law school flashed by, and I was all of a sudden taking the Missouri bar exam in Jefferson City, Missouri. 195. I had stayed in touch with the county attorney and the local lawyer who wanted to sell me his practice back home. I could buy it, but I also knew that the area population had grown enough that it might support 2 lawyers. The county attorney decided to run for another 4-year term, so that wasn't where I should go. The man did offer me a place on his staff, knowing that he wouldn't do anything and I would do everything for a junior attorney's salary. 1927. I declined and said I might run against him next term. I found a home at the end of the business district that I could buy and convert into a decent office. There was now more money in my investment account than what I had started with, so I had enough to remodel the house and make it into a good, friendly place to do business. I had a nice sign made that hung on a bar off 2 posts that declared that Bernard Bernie Beck, attorney at law, was in the building and ready to do business. 1950. I had a couple of property disputes to work on, and then an accident involving a concrete truck that ended up being something the entire county heard about. I won a big settlement for the client over the next year and had to help them out during the proceedings because the breadwinner was now nearly paralyzed and couldn't work. 1106. His huge settlement paid me back, plus paid me my attorney's fees. It was at our home celebration dinner that Julia told the family there, "We're going to have another baby and it's going to be a boy this time because it's all different." Little Julie was totally different than this one, so it has to be a boy. 1-10-21. My practice grew from people I knew and who I had gone to school with. The man with the practice in the bank building came to me and asked if I wanted to buy him out. I said, "Look, you promised to give or sell me your practice when I graduated from law school." "You didn't." So I started my own and began practicing law. Find someone else to sell out to now because I'm already earning a living, doing what I set out to do. 1-10-42. The guy's argument was that I was living at home and mustn't have been making enough to afford my own place. I had to explain. I have a savings account that has purchased the Miller place and more than enough money to build a mansion on it. My grandpa and grandma want me, my wife, and daughter to live with them. Why would I live anywhere else? My wife and daughter are happy. 1-11-00. My great-grandparents are happy. My sister, her husband, and their now 3 kids are happy. So why should I build that mansion? Keep your clients and good luck in selling your practice. My practice had rapidly grown with me getting all kinds of small-town lawyer stuff to do. There were a couple of criminal cases that I didn't want to handle, but I did anyway. 1-11-18. One guy got off because the prosecuting attorney hadn't done his homework. I felt bad because the guy was guilty as sin. It wasn't my problem, but I still felt bad. One of the 17-year-old neighbor boys got a 13-year-old neighbor girl pregnant. He was legal, but she wasn't by a year. I had to do all kinds of contortions to keep the statutory assault charge at bay until both kids' parents were willing to help them get married. 1-11-41. The girl's family had money and paid me my fees, which really didn't cover the effort that I put into the case. I now had a legal secretary who had moved to the area. She was an attractive lady, but could have been my mother. We got along great, and she was good for the office since she went to a different church than my family did, so we were able to spread the word of mouth that much faster. 1-11-59. A couple of the small resorts had some state and federal problems with their operation because they raised feeder fish for bait. Who would know all the regulations for doing something as simple as that? The resorts were able to comply by building tanks in the lake instead of having freestanding tanks. 1-12-14. They could still recirculate the water and ended up building other very large tanks to raise trout, to restock the lakes and for local markets. My son was born on schedule. Julia was still busy with Julie and now had Bernard Jr. or BJ. I worked hard every day, keeping busy by visiting every business in a 100-mile radius. 1-12-33. I was picking up legal work that people needed done. Plus, there was a constant stream of people wanting to transfer property, have wills created, and use me to apply for building permits. Julia proved to be very fertile and was almost immediately pregnant again. She said that it would be a boy, and it was. 1-12-49. We named this one Bill after my dad. It was now becoming a little cramped in the old farmhouse with us having 3 kids. Julia had a small desk in our bedroom that she used to do our billing and record keeping. She needed more room, but she wanted to be home with her babies. Julia decided that we needed to build our house so her grandma could move down to be with us. 1-13-7. Her Aunt Jill came down and had some architects design a massive home that would house us, Gamma, and her staff, as well as Grandpa and Happy, since they would eventually need to be cared for. Bryce had learned well and was now in charge of the stills in Beck's Best. He was still growing his own grains and enough sugarcane to supply the neighbors with sugar and cane mixed as a supplement for the stock. 1:13:28. I would still have to help him with the initial fermentation and distilling, but that was only for a couple of weeks and mostly on weekends. Happy Grandma Julia and my Julia went to the big stores in Kansas City and picked out furniture for the entire new house the day it was completed. They had gone to several stores to find exactly what they wanted and had it shipped and delivered in 2 moving vans and also set up. 1:13:49. The aunts came to help get all the curtains up and the furniture in place. Cora and James brought Grandmother Julia down to look through the house and discovered that the interior was very close to her home in Kolaya, but larger with more specific areas or wings for people. Grandpa thought the place was wonderful, and Happy was ecstatic to have the new kitchen and help from Cora, Julia, and Mrs. McKinley, the other Julia. 1:14:11. My practice had almost quadrupled from the first year and was paying enough to offset what would have been a debt on the original office that had been a house. There was enough business for me to find another young attorney and spend some time soliciting business from the other business owners in town and the surrounding areas. 1:14:27. It's amazing how being at the right place at the right time can be a great business practice. The big city law firm who bought the retiring lawyer's practice didn't have a clue on how to deal with country folk and drove them to me. My legal secretary wanted help, so she was in charge of finding someone to help her. 1:14:42. She found another older lady legal secretary who wanted to live in a small community. I think I was the most amazed that the area around our county could support a law office as large as ours. We were still locally famous for the large settlement from the concrete company, and had people come to us for all kinds of auto accidents and various work-related accidents. 1:15:1. I would often need to have the potential client go somewhere else because I already represented the business where the accident happened. That person often went to the big city where they would put a substandard or new attorney on the case. I knew how to prepare to win a case in every way. While the big city people felt there was no way a country lawyer would be a problem, I usually sent them home to go back to school. 1:15:21. I had learned to get all the information and have it ready to properly present while in law school and while practicing. My family had all moved into the new home and were renting the old farmhouse out to an older couple who had lost their home to their mortgage company. Grandpa and Bryce each had one of those fancy 4-wheel drive carts that let them go over to the old farm to take care of stock and keep track of the place. 1:15:41. Grandpa had known the man who rented our old place was born and raised in the area since he was a child. Happy knew the woman from church and visiting over the years. The one they didn't know well was their son, an out-of-work person who knew all the tricks to keep getting his unemployment checks and looked to be going to get a disability from Social Security. 1:15:58. It was when I opened my own office that I had bought an older used Impala. The car ran great and had everything I needed. I kept it up, and although the ugly green paint was faded, the car was everything I needed. It became almost a symbol of me around the area. I could go to work in jeans, boots, and a flannel shirt driving my old green Impala, and everyone would wave at me as I drove by. 1:16:19. My wife, Julia, didn't like the fact that I drove that old car, so I had to convince her that it was a symbol that I was just one of the people in the county and surrounding area and not some self-important jerk. Julia had the fairly new Suburban from the Columbia family dealership, so I told her, "Have Happy watch the kids, and you and I will make the rounds for business in the Suburban one day and the old Impala the next." 1:16:42. Julia accepted the challenge and dressed down for her and went with me while I went to talk to clients the way I always did. No one waved at us and no one honked their horn to say hi. We had to be inside before people recognized us when we went to the cafe for lunch. We went to town dressed up a little the next day as I had an appointment with the bank about a legal matter, but we went in the old green Impala. 1:17:2. People waved, honked, and one guy came out of his house to stop me to ask about a problem. People were already hollering at me for running around on my wife when we went into the cafe. They knew Julia and were just teasing, but she understood how I used that old car to let people know that I was one of them. Julia sat on my lap one morning and told me, "You've done it again." 1:17:20. I think this one is a girl again, but it's confusing because I get both feelings. Isn't it great that we're going to have another baby? I'm still so in love with you that I'm just floating along being as happy as happy. No one knows yet except the doctor. So, when can I tell them? Do it tonight. 1:17:37. Have Cora happy and your GMA help make a special supper and announce it. Then call your aunts and have them come down too. We have plenty of beds for them all. I'm very excited to know we're going to continue to be good parents. Grandpa had me outside by the little barn I had built to help make the place look like a farm before I left that morning. 1:17:53. Grandpa said, I'm worried about the Larson kid. He never does anything except go to town to play cards and drink. He'll go down to Mobile and gamble fairly often, but he doesn't have the money to do that. I need to watch him, Bernie, and you should probably have the law watch him too. That worried me while driving into town to carry on the day's business. 1:18:10. I went by the sheriff's office and found him at his desk. He warmly greeted me, although I usually was his adversary. He wanted to know what I needed or wanted. You know, the Larsons who rented our old home, Sheriff, they're good people, but Grandpa is worried and is concerned that their kid, Robert, might be a problem. 1:18:27. You need to check up on his past to make sure that he isn't someone of interest to the feds or state. He seems to have more money than he should have by going down to Mobile and gambling fairly often. Grandpa thinks that his folks might be afraid of him. Help me help those folks and find out if there is a problem with the kid. 1:18:42. The sheriff punched in some characters on his computer and nodded to me. I have him right here and he does have a past. It seems that he may have been involved in some bank robberies, but was never arrested for them. It looks like he doesn't have any fingerprints on file, so none of the forensics has him in on those robberies. 1:18:58. You may have a good suspect for some older problems. Be careful, though, as this guy could be very dangerous. He's the combination of country bumpkin and wild man we create down here. I hadn't heard that before, but could understand how it fit. Grandpa said he would be prepared when I told him what I knew. I knew Grandpa had several shotguns, and he had a lot of double buckshot rounds that were used on predators that came around the farm. 1:19:20. We only had chickens here along with a calf and year-and-a-half-old steer that would be table fare soon. Our place wasn't a working farm, just a big home with some stock. The fields were all worked with our equipment from the old farm that Bryce and I took care of. I went by the local gunsmith store and discussed buying a handgun or two. 1:19:37. When I went to town, the man said that I could buy all I wanted, but had to go through the state and federal background checks. It didn't seem to matter, so I did everything required and was able to buy 4 handguns. I bought 3 9mm Glocks and a .357 revolver because the gunsmith said most women prefer a revolver. 1:19:55. After the 3-day wait, before I could pick them up, I took my wife to a pistol range in Springfield and taught her to use the revolver and then the Glock. She preferred the Glock and scored very nicely on the range. I used the revolver and scored okay, but not nearly as well as I did with the Glock. 1:20:10. We now had a Glock at home, one always with Julia and one with me. Grandpa had his old .455 long-barreled pistol that he said he could scratch the back of an ant at 25 feet with. I traded the .357 revolver for another Glock. So I had one in the car and one at the office, where I learned both my secretary and her new assistant were both proficient with handguns, pistol packing mamas. 1:20:32. Missouri is lenient toward guns and makes it easy to get a concealed weapon permit. I made sure Julia as well as James had one. Grandpa said that he didn't need one because when he carried his .45, it was visible and Missouri had an open carry law. All that talk about guns was to prepare you for what happened to the lens. 1:20:50. The way the story was told, the kid, Robert, came home from town very drunk one night, driving erratically enough that one of the sheriff's deputies followed him all the way home. The deputy turned his red and blue lights on when they reached the house, which must have made the kid angry or nervous because he got out of his car firing a handgun at the deputy's car. 1:21:07. The deputy was struck by a bullet, but not seriously. He was able to call for assistance for the other night patrol car as well as the state police. The gun battle continued until Robert was finally hit and knocked down. The senior Mr. Larson came from the house carrying his shotgun about that time, which the deputy thought was meant for him. 1:21:25. So he shot Mr. Larson, who fell down, but was only wounded. The other county deputy arrived in time to see Robert get up from the ground and begin firing at both deputies. Now, a state patrolman came to the house and was also fired on, with all three law officers shooting back at Robert. 1:21:42. He ended up being shot 11 times before he quit shooting back. It was later learned that the three officers had fired over 100 rounds. Robert died, and they found he had been involved in several homicides when they ran his fingerprints. His pistol had been the gun that killed a couple of men up in Kansas City and one in Chicago. Grandpa later learned that Mrs. 1:21:59 Elson had been cleaning out Robert's room and found a very large money cache. They decided not to tell the law about it and lived their lives off the son's probably ill-gotten monies. Julia was only about 4 months along with our fourth baby when she finally went back to the doctor for her first real baby exam. 1:22:16. She came into the law office with a funny look on her face. She sat down on one of the desk chairs and just stared at me. I asked, "What's the matter, Julia?" "What did the doctor have to say? Is there a problem?" Julia didn't seem to know whether she should laugh or cry. She got up, came around the desk, and sat on my lap. 1:22:32. My sweet wife and mother of our children hugged me and said, "I hope you won't be mad, honey. We're going to have twins. There are 2 of them in here. We really did it this time, didn't we?" I tried to joke with her and replied, "The new house is big enough for more kids, and I bet you can find help down here for when you have them." 1:22:49. The other 3 are doing well with the little one already trying to walk. Be happy that you're a healthy specimen of motherhood. I'll have the doc do a clip job on me when you have these too. No more baby making for you, Julia teased. But what if I decide that I need to fool around with some young guy who is just full of it? What's going to protect me? I suggested you should ask who's going to protect him. 1:23:11. You, my sweet, are my one and only the only woman I've ever been intimate with, and the only woman I'm ever going to be intimate with. You constantly tell me how much you love me, and I still act like a jealous shrew with you. I wouldn't blame you for trying out some of the handsome young guys I see at the grocery store. There are going to be further complications with the dues, and don't do along with the girls who will be working the gardens if we get some nanny help. 1:23:32. We were able to find a very nice Mexican girl who loves children. It didn't take her any time to have the kids wanting to be with her when mom and dad weren't available. Julia was home most days, but she spent a lot of her work time there working the office accounts. We had many clients who we wanted to keep current as monthly and quarterly billing accounts, and usually only billed the minimum for their ongoing retainer. 1:23:54. Grandmother McKinley seemed to flourish being down in the country. She would have James drive her to town or to one of the bigger cities. Springfield and Columbia are about the same distance. St. Louis and Kansas City, for some really big cities, are about the same distance by car. Of course, those trips usually required at least one overnight stay. Bernie Jr., 1:24:12, came to see me with a serious look on his face one morning after the twins were delivered to us by the stork. Of course, Tony the Tiger, Captain Crunch, or even the Weddies I liked couldn't get the scowl off his face. BJ for Bernie Jr. finally told me his problem. He told me, "I'm almost 5 years old and no one will let me out of the house unless an adult is going to be with me." 1:24:34. I know what not to do and won't go away from the house and barn. I want to be outside and do things. Julie's only a couple of years older than me and doesn't like to be outside as much as me. Grandpa and Bryce won't take me with them when they go off to do whatever they do. I can catch chickens that get out of their pen or make sure there aren't any loose strings from the bales mixed in with the loose hay and straw. 1:24:54. Give me some rows of a garden to pull weeds and I'll do any of that, but let me be outside. I asked my son, "Tell me about your schoolwork. Are you keeping up with it?" Maria doesn't understand that I can read just about anything as well as Julie and know to look up words I don't know. She's taught Julie and me Mexican, or I guess that's Spanish, and I've been learning the Spanish grammar. 1:25:14. They spell a lot of things funny. Gamma is teaching us German, and that is a funny language. You do a lot of growling and stuff. We try to talk to each other in German, and we understand her pretty well. She says we tell her the right things too. We're going to learn French next. I looked at my son more intensely and asked, "So you're bored with what we have for you at age 5? 1:25:32. I'll talk to some people who know how much kids can absorb. All of us together will have you mentally busy. Let's see if your mom will let you play outside until we can find more things for you to do. You know, she keeps you in so that she knows you're safe, don't you? I don't have any friends to play with. 1:25:46. And the kids my age at church go to kindergarten. Daddy, they don't even know how to read yet. Aunt Sophie's older, too. My cousins are like I am and don't go to school, but Mom won't let me run over there by myself." I remembered how I could follow my dad when he was still alive, and even Grandpa and Great-Granddad when they would allow it. 1:26:2. I don't remember how old and I were when we were outside all the time, but I know that it was before kindergarten. There were times when I didn't follow all the rules, but none of my adventures came back to bite me on the butt. I think that's another reason I've always been independent and determined to make it on my own. 1:26:18. Let's go talk to your mother. Stay quiet unless you're asked. Let me do the talking. Julia hadn't settled down at her desk, yet since she was sitting in her rocker nursing the twins, Jeb and Deb, that was Julia's fault because she wanted to name the twins after some of my family. So we had a Zeba and a Deborah, my grandmother's name, which came out Jeb and Deb. 1:26:38. Our third child, a boy named Bill, was happily playing on the floor. Julie must have been in her room or under her great-great-grandmother's feet, somewhere near the kitchen. I love my family. I softly spoke to Julia while the twins nursed. BJ is becoming old enough to safely play outside by himself. He's smart and minds better than most of the kids you see his age. 1:26:57. When have you had to yell at her for him after church while the kids are all out running around? I know that you want to keep him safe, but he's a farm boy and needs to be outside doing things a boy can do out there. Have him pull some weeds in the garden a couple mornings a week and then let him do those things a boy wants to do. 1:27:13. Julia looked up from lovingly watching her baby's nurse and said, "I just worry, Bernie. I wouldn't know if he were to get into trouble, but you're right. He does need to be outside more. It's only a short run through the edge of the woods to go to Sophie's house, so he might go over there and play with her kids." 1:27:28. They could all run back over here for lunch or to play. She smiled at BJ and me and then at her now sleeping infants. She nodded at me, which meant for me to pick one up, burp him her, rewrap a blanket on him her, and put him her back in the bassinet. I did the second one without thinking about which one was Jeb or Deb, and then held my hand out to pull Julia up. 1:27:47. She hugged me and softly said, "I love you." Those soft words made my whole life come into a mental image with a glow around my thoughts. Julia would think of another reason why I shouldn't go. Every time I wanted to schedule the clip job to be done in Colombia, my loving wife would be all over me, wanting us to do some serious loving when her 6 weeks of abstinence were complete. 1:28:08. One evening when we went to bed and it was obvious that Julia wanted some loving. I told her, "Julia, lover, we'll end up with 6 kids if we're not careful. Your body has done enough by giving us the 5 we've had." Julia was lovingly kissing me and trying to keep me ready for our joining. 1:32:20. I've had to exceed her request to keep up the Kolaya home, but it's been worth it. Listen carefully the first time through, and I promise to slowly go through it again so we all understand. James and Cora, please serve everyone, including yourselves, a couple of fingers of grandmother's favorite beverage. I'll go through the will while you sip. 1:32:38. Grandmother was a very loving person and spoke of her caretakers first. This first part is for James and Cora. I'm reading directly from her will. To James and Cora, you two have tried to hide your relationship from me for all these years, but I'm no dummy and know that you've been lovers since you both came to work with me. Your salary will continue until you pass on to that other side. 1:32:57. But I want you both to know that you can live with my great-granddaughter Julia, or you can go back and live at the home in Colombia, live in both places if you want. but know that you're welcome in either one for the rest of your lives. You will be provided with sufficient funds to keep the pantry full and to be comfortable in that big old house. I do have a stipulation. 133:15. I want you two to marry and continue to give your secret smile to each other for the rest of your lives. James and Cora were hugging each other with tears on both their faces. To the granddaughters and their husbands, I'm leaving the automobile dealership to you free and clear of any debt. I'm sure that you will be generous with your children and grandchildren. 133:34. Each of you and each of your children have a trust to be given to them when they reach the age of 25. That one paragraph was enormous as it guaranteed the next several years to be profitable for the dealership. To Julia and her family, I leave the balance of all my earthly possessions. I know Bernie will continue to look after the family, James and Cora, and will make the appropriate donations in the family name over the years to all of you. 133:58. I'll be watching over you, and although I can't intervene with your mortal lives, I will be with you with my love forever. I said there is another 5 pages of small type that lists several pieces of property the McKinleys own that Julio and I, along with the other family members, will decide what to do with. 134:13. I'm sure we'll all agree if any of you want to build another home on the land. I'm also sure that we would all agree if one of you want to move into the big home, but we do want for you to keep your grandmother's promise to James and Cora. I want to state that every change to her property will require a family meeting. 134:28. I got up and poured some more of Beck's best to each person sitting around the table. I sipped a little when I sat back down, then said, Your grandmother specifically excluded both Scots, but has left an unsealed envelope to each that I was told should be read to all here. 134:44. The first one is to Scott Senior Scott. I'm not sure you're still alive because we haven't heard from you for over 7 years. As you'll know, if you receive this, I have gone to be with my man. I haven't left you anything except a little shack that sits on a couple of acres on the lake. You used to love to go there, so it's yours. 134:59. You'll have to claim it and pay the back taxes because my estate will cease paying the taxes on the land and let it go to a tax sale. You disappointed me terribly and would have disappointed your great-grandfather as well. I wish you well and hope that you've learned to be a good person. This second letter is to Scott Jr. Scott Jr., 135:16. You send me a letter about every other month to let me know you're still living. Thank you for that. From what my attorney has found out, you still have several more years to serve. You will be given the opportunity for parole during your last 5 years. I hope you will be granted your semi-freedom. Please make the most of it. 135:31. Your aunts and uncles have agreed to provide a job at the dealership for you, so take advantage of the opportunity. Included with this letter is a bank book that contains what remains of your trust money. It is still sizable and will enable you to get a fresh start. Also included is a copy of the letter I have for your father, should he ever show up again. 135:50. If you want to live in the little house on the lake, it really isn't a shack, and could be a place for you. Just use the documents that are in his letter to register the land and keep up on the taxes. I hope you've learned a valuable lesson and will become a good citizen. Love, Julia McKinley. I set the copies of all the documents on the table and told everyone there. 136:7. Please read everything there and come to me with any questions. Your grandmother had me sit in with the family attorneys to complete her will. Look around and you know that she's probably hovering over us, wishing that she could interject one of her wise cracks. We all love that old lady and wish we could keep her forever. 136:23. The family read everything that weekend, and we agreed as a group to hire a private detective to track down Scott Sr. What was sad is that my Julia's mother hadn't stayed in touch with her daughter. That deeply hurt her, but the love she received from her Gamma and Happy was enough to keep her happy as a mother and wife. 136:41. Julia and the aunts decided to go to the state prison to give Scott Jr. his letter. Julia brought the letter, her dad's letter, and pictures of all her children. I heard secondhand that Scott apologized to Julia for the way he acted in college. He even commented that he wasn't deserving of the fame and fortune everyone had told him he would have. 136:58. He sent a letter telling me how his father and coaches had convinced him that he was a special person and should be treated as such. He said that he looked forward to shaking my hand and apologizing to me. I sure hope that was a reality. Sophie had Julia, me, and our children over for dinner one night. When all the dishes were cleared and all the adults were sitting back with full tummies, Sophie said, "I'm not sure that I want to rent out the farm again." 137:21. The Larsons kept it up, but their son scared the out of us. Bryce is keeping up with the farm work because you help, and we've had the money to improve our equipment, but I think we might want more than what we have. Sophie was uncomfortable with the subject, but continued, "I'm doing what I always wanted to do, and that's to be a good wife and raise my babies." 137:40. Bryce continues with the farm's goal to raise the grains and sugarcane needed to continue Jeb's heritage. Bryce took the floor now and said, "Not to brag, but I think this last year's batch is one of Grandpa's best, and it is a batch that you and I are totally responsible for. We now have 5 years of Beck's best aging in the caves." 137:59. I'd like to apply for a federal license to make and sell liquor. I think we could get almost $50 for a 750 milliliter bottle if we bottled 5-year-old Beck's best. That's ridiculously high, but I think it's close to being possible. I don't want to make more volume than we make right now yet. I also don't want to have to make those annual trips to Kansas City and to Nashville with milk cans full of our best. 138:20. What do you think, Bernie? I smiled at my sister's husband and said, "I'm for it as long as I still get a little to taste at the house." That broke my sister up. She said Mr. Straight and Narrow has found that he likes the special blend that goes into BX's best. I asked Bryce, "Will this give you that much more income?" "You guys work hard to make what we sell, and it's always dependent on if we get the right amount of rain for our crops." 138:41. "Is this fair to you?" Bryce said. "We've had enough room to grow a lot more corn, barley, oats, rye, and sugarcane since you bought the Miller place. We sell a lot of our grains and sugar, but we have the raw materials to just about double the production if we were to increase how much we distill." 138:57. "We'll have to buy twice the amount of good oak barrels and find places to store them." I told Bryce, "I'm for trying and I'll do my best to take time off from work while you're brewing." Bryce said, "See, that's what I'm talking about. I can hire people to do the hard work and continue to do business just like your grandfather did, and wouldn't have to worry about the Raveneers if we were legal." 139:18. Sophie said, "There's a lot of record keeping for the feds, but I think we can do it. We'll have to build a road up to the caves where the best is aging so that it can be bottled, and we'd be an illegal business." Julia added to the conversation by asking, "That still doesn't answer the question of what you're going to do with the old farmhouse." 139:34. Sophie said, "No, it doesn't. But I've kept the place clean and made sure that the water is flowing properly. We'll have to work with the preacher to find someone deserving to live there. We might even find someone who's willing to work with the liquor as well. It's no different than those big-time whiskey makers in Kentucky. We'll have some good stuff that is known more locally than nationally." 139:51. James and Cora had us sit down in our main sitting room and brought Gamma's big earthen jug and 4 glasses that night. James said, "Cora and I want to get married by the preacher in Columbia who cared so much for Julia. I think we want to live in the big house for a while, but we'll come back down often." 148. Cora asked, "Do you think we can trade the limousine in for a regular car? It would be cheaper to drive back and forth down here." Julia said, "I'll make sure my aunts make you a free and clear deal for something you like. Go to the dealership and pick out what you'd want. The limousine is in great condition and should be worth a lot in Kansas City or St. Louis." 140:26. "I'll make sure all the taxes and registration for your new car are taken care of. My office now had 2 additional attorneys and 4 more legal secretaries." I asked Hazel, my initial legal secretary, "How did we become so popular that we have to have 4 attorneys and 6 legal secretaries?" Hazel smiled at me as she said, "You need to quit going out to sign up more and more people to represent." 14047. You now have all the resorts in Branson and most of them up in the Lake of the Ozarks. We're handling cases in Springfield and just about every community around. We could use another 2 or 3 attorneys and legal secretaries. Even your wife says that we're getting too big. She says that she can barely do all the billing by herself and it's keeping her from your kids. Well, damn. 14106. I didn't realize growth could be a problem. One thing I had learned in law school was to always listen to those around you and immediately confront any problems. This was a problem. So, I had a meeting out at the house. It included all the office staff, Julia and me, of course. I opened the meeting with, I haven't been paying attention for a while, and our office is producing more than is almost possible. 14127. I've just found out we had to farm out a couple of cases that had to be handled in St. Louis, and another one in Kansas City. It's hard to believe we can't handle everything that comes our way with the staff we have. Another problem is that Julia is overwhelmed by trying to continue to do the office billing. 14142. I think we're going to have a separate billing center and let Julia become a homebody. We're here to come up with solutions on how to do what needs to be done. You all have legal pads with plenty of pencils, so write your thoughts down so that we can discuss each of them. There was initially no conversation, but it began after about 15 minutes, and everyone was sharing what they were thinking and writing. 142. 1. This was exactly what I wanted to have happen. Hazel made the first general statement. I think we need additional offices in Springfield, Jefferson City, and up in Collier. We'll probably have to find at least 2 or 3 attorneys for each site. Julia said that would make it easier to bill for each office. 14217. I think Bernie should buy the 2 houses next door to our office, tear one down for parking, and use the other as a central billing office. That's going to be a lot of overhead, but I think we'll be in great position to collect what's owed us with the increased business from 2 or 3 new offices. 14232. We'll have to find the person who can manage that kind of billing operation. We cussed and discussed what needed to be done until almost 3 o'clock in the morning, that Friday night and Saturday morning. I had everyone leave all their scratch paper so that I could go over all their musings. Julia and I went to bed and cuddled together as we talked about our future. 14251. Julia said, I think we've had enough children for now. I love our little ones so much, and it means a lot that we created them together, but I think it's time we stop having more. Let's make sure we don't have any more babies. The kids didn't let us sleep in waking up at their usual time. They always wanted mommy's attention first thing in the morning. 143 and 8. So Maria helped change them and laid them with Julia. Sometimes I would tickle their feet if I was in bed with them, but we found that it would make them pee again. So diapers had to be changed mid-feed. I had to do the diaper change since I caused the problem. Since it was Saturday, Bernie Jr., 14322, showed me all the work he had done during the week when he was allowed to be outside by himself. He had weeded a third of the garden, separated the hay bale strings from all our loose hay, and started clearing a path through the forest between our house and Sophie's. He said he would need help cutting down some trees, but he wanted to make the trail wide enough to drive one of the carts between the houses so the kids could play together. 14344. BJ and I used Grandpa's cart to go to the old farm and get the 24-inch chainsaw. We worked together to cut down the trees, blocking the trail as close to the ground as we could, making it possible to drive right over them. We were almost 3/4 of the way to Sophie's and Bryce's before lunch. The houses were only about 1/4 of a mile apart, so this would be a trail the kids could use often. 14404. BJ was determined to finish, and we got the job done that afternoon. We also cut up the brush to create some rabbit dens and saved a couple of large trees to dry out for fireplace next year. I was amazed at BJ's planning when we had the trail cleared because you could look out our kitchen window and see straight down the trail to Sophie's kitchen window. 14421. Mothers on either end could watch the kids travel to the other home and not worry about them. I could see that BJ was going to be someone to watch if he could reason and plan that way before age 6. I spent Sunday going over what it would cost to buy the 2 homes next to my office, plus the remodeling required to make one of them a business office. 14440. The man who owned the two houses was an old grouch who always thought his property was worth double what the real value was. He had two old oaks that were dying on the property and kept shedding limbs. The tree should have been cut down several years ago, but the grouch was also cheap and didn't want to spend the money. 144.55. The town condemned the two properties because of the danger of the trees, but old Mr. Hannigan wouldn't reduce his price. This was summer and our area was subject to some really bad thunderstorms, and we occasionally did suffer some tornadoes. A freak storm came through town a couple of weeks later, uprooting the two big oaks and nearly destroyed the two homes. 145.13. My building was left alone and didn't even lose any shingles. The property was even worse now because the houses were so badly damaged. I made Hannigan an offer that included the cost of tearing the buildings down. It took the man only overnight to consider the deal, and we closed on the properties in a week. 145.29. One of our local contractors had been out to begin making estimates and had his men cut up the two trees that had been uprooted. It's so amazing to see the power of tornadoes and how selective they can be. There was an old barn just outside of town that had been destroyed, and those two houses and the barn were the only places where the funnel touched down. 145.48. The contractor surprised me when he came to me with an offer. He said both houses were built very well and didn't suffer that much damage. Bernie, I've had the men put tarps over the roofs to keep the rain out. You mentioned that you wanted to tear one of the houses down for a parking area. Consider this. The backyards of all three houses are very big, and just the office building parking area handles your current, employee, and customer parking. 146.11. I recommend that you repair both houses and rebuild their interiors as office spaces. You could lease the office space out in one of the buildings, and that would offset your purchase price. We'll repair the building you won't need, but leave the interior open so that you can divide it and do a build-out to suit another business. 146.26. Let me show you the numbers for doing this. What the contractor wanted was less than I had thought it would cost to demolish the houses and build a small office building. Keeping the homes intact will make the 3 two-story houses appear much friendlier. I sent an attorney to Springfield to survey the other attorneys there, and to get a handle on what it would cost for a small office to handle an attorney and secretary. 146.46. We had agreed on what would be needed, and they were anxious for our firm to spread out. The office staff voted on another attorney going to Columbia and one to Jefferson City to do the same thing. Those 3 offices would be buzzing very soon if these 3 attorneys went out to solicit business the way I did in the beginning. 147.3. All the construction and expansion kept me from going to St. Louis to have the clip job I needed. Julia had scheduled the procedure that she needed to stop her from conceiving, and had it was performed without any problem. She was going to be on restriction for a little over a month. So I made the appointment and had the mostly painless procedure done. 147.19. The two of us were very loving toward each other because we would soon be able to be wild again and enjoy the great physical love we've always had. The business office opening was a busy time, requiring Julia to be at the office hiring and training for a month. Julia found she had a problem at home when she was able to hand the office over to the lady who was going to be in charge. 147.39. Marie had found a young man who she wanted to marry, but he lived in Arkansas. It wasn't that far if she wanted to commute, but Maria wanted to have babies and be a stay-at-home mom. James and Kay had come here to live for a while and helped out as Julia became the housewife she had wanted to be. The problem was that the office still needed her at least 1 or 2 days a week. 147.58. The search was on for someone to replace Maria, who the kids, Julia, and I all liked. Cora brought a lady out to the house to meet Julia and the family. She had been a junior high school teacher in Philadelphia, but had been robbed twice and even assaulted in her apartment by a home invader. She was temporarily living in Springfield and considering applying with the school system. 148.18. Kay found her while shopping in a dress shop in the mall there. They became friendly, and Kay convinced her to come out and see our home and meet the kids. She came on a rainy summer day, so the kids were all inside. I think the first thing that surprised Shauna, Cora's friend, was that none of the kids were watching television. Julie was reading a children's book to Deb and Jeb, who were now almost 3. 148:38. She would read the page and then read it again, while pointing at each of the words, and the two, who were still toddlers, would repeat the words after Julie read them. BJ and Bill were playing chess on the floor, joking about the mistakes the other was making. Maria was all over Shauna to make her feel comfortable. 148:54. And then came James and Kay to almost overwhelm Shauna. Julia said she could see that Shauna couldn't believe the kids were so well behaved when she greeted her. Julia told her, "We've tried to teach them all to enjoy each other. We found out that each having a toy wasn't as good as having one toy. And the 3 learned to share." 149:10. We would explain to them that having a brother or sister was something special, and it's good to share things instead of one hogging something. I heard James say something to Julie in German. She answered him and said something to BJ. Bill was still learning, but without Gamma now. James turned to Shauna and said, "The children wanted to know if you would take over teaching them now." 149:28. They really enjoy languages, and the 2 oldest speak, read, and write German. Well, they are as good with Spanish and have a lot of practice with some of the garden workers. Their great-great-grandmother was also teaching them French when she died, and they want to learn more. Now that Cora and I are visiting for a while, I'll teach them some more French, unless you'd like to do that. 149:49. Julia told me that Shauna took hold of her arm and said, "You must hire me to be the nanny for your children. I do speak French, but only a little German. I'll learn from James as long as he's around and is willing to teach me." "How advanced are the children?" Julia said, "It's my husband's fault. He and his sister are exceptional people and learn at a much faster rate than most people." 159. The kids seem to follow in his ability. Julia is doing high school work now, and BJ isn't that far behind. Bill will be 5 next week and is doing 3rd grade work. As you can see, Julie enjoys teaching the words to the twins. She speaks Spanish to them as well as German, so they are able to understand when Maria forgets and talks to them in her native language. 150:28. Julia took Shauna around the house to show her where her rooms would be and then asked, "Do you cook?" Part of the job is to help with meals, especially lunches for the kids. We often have the sister's kids here for lunch, but she only has 3 and they are mostly older than mine. Those kids will be homeschooled with mine, so this job is a busy one. 150:45. We'll get another helper if we need one, although Maria was able to do most everything. She learned along with the children, so it was a good relationship. Shauna turned to Cora. "Can you take me back to Springfield to get my few belongings? I still have most everything in boxes." Cora said, "We'll use Julia's Suburban so that there will be plenty of room." 151:3. "I forgot that you don't have a car and depend on public transportation. Let's go get that done so you can begin to learn how Maria takes care of the house." Julia told me that she asked Maria to find her another girl to help with the family. Julie also told me that she didn't want to act like a spoiled wife, but she wanted to be free to help at the office and to spend even more time with the children. 151:22. I think her great-grandmother had influenced her a great deal. Maria's wedding was special because we were able to have it at our place. We had plenty of room for all Maria's and her new husband's relatives. And it was while all the families were celebrating that Julia and Shauna found a girl in her late 20s who was very reticent to mingle with most of the others. 151:42. The girl Ria was following Julia and Shauna. By the end of the evening, Julie and BJ spoke to her in Spanish a couple of times, which made her feel comfortable. Shauna and Julia set a time to meet Ria at her home on Monday. I was unaware that Shauna and Julia had found someone who was going to be an additional housekeeper, cook, and childcare person. 152. This stranger came to sit across from me when I came home from work and sat with the twins while they told me of their day. Deb said, "This is Ria. She's going to take Maria's place. She is very smart and speaks, reads, and writes English. She told me that she is one of many children in her family, and it is good that she is going to go to work for us." 152:18. I looked at Jeb as he had the family's male qualities, and he smiled. He softly said, "She's very nice and very soft. She hugs nice." There it was from the male perspective. He didn't care whether or not she was smart, but thought that it was good that she was soft and hugged nice. Bill was the quiet one. 152:34. He didn't offer an opinion, but smiled at Rhea while with his siblings in front of me. Julia came in and sat on my lap, displacing the twins. They were used to that and didn't complain. Julia explained that Rhea had been learning from Cora and her all day, and she thought that the young lady would work out well. She did indeed come from a very large family who were all illegally here in the U.S. 152:54. I was surprised that the children 16 and older who weren't in school were all employed at various labor-intensive jobs. Julia said, "You haven't done any immigration work, but I'll bet that at least one or two of your attorneys have. I want you to help Rhea and her family to become legal. The children like Rhea, and I like her too." 153:10. A new mandate from the mistress. Later, when the children were all in bed, and the other adults let Julia and me snuggle on the couch, I told Julia, "You know that Friday is your 30th birthday. If you remember from your grandmother's will, she said that you had a surprise coming later that you would find was more valuable than being a part owner in the car dealership." 153:30. I can't divulge what it is since I only know because of executive's privilege. You and I are going out to eat Friday evening so that I can tell you about your surprise. Julia looked at me strangely and said, "What more could Gamma give us? I know your grandfather paid for some of this beautiful home, and I thought that Gamma paid for the bulk of it." 153:47. I smiled when I told her, "Most of the cost of building this place actually was from my investment account that came from Scott Jr., the same money that paid for the remodeling of the 2 new buildings. We didn't use your trust money because we haven't needed it. I know from handling a lot of the dealership's legal work that your aunts haven't used theirs either." 154:3. Your family doesn't have to be, but are very frugal considering their wealth. Julia said, "Well, we aren't doing too shabby either. My trusts are worth so much that we may not be able to count that high. We don't use any of it because we haven't had to. Your expansion might stretch you out a little, but that's what the trust is there for." 154:22. What could Gamma have left me that she considers so important? Friday is only a couple of days away. I then told Julia I'm planning to announce that I want to form a business partnership with the other attorneys. I don't know exactly how to do this, but I want all the attorneys to have the opportunity to be part owners of the firm after working with us for 5 years. 154:38. Someone is going to stay around if they have stuck with us for that long. I really need to figure out a way to include some of our legal secretaries through a profit-sharing program, even though the law doesn't permit them to be partners with lawyers. Julia said, "I'll think about that and see if I get any ideas." 154:55. The partnership idea is a good one, and it will bond you with the attorneys you send out to the new offices and any new ones you hire. I was teased and tormented by Julia as she tried to weasel more information about the birthday surprise out of me. We made love that night the way we usually do. It's almost like it's something that has to happen before we can relax in each other's arms and sleep. 155:14. I had an office meeting at 3 in the afternoon. The next day, I had made sure none of the personnel had appointments that would overlap into this time. My announcement about creating a partnership stunned the attorneys. I told them, "This is important because you will participate in the firm's profits in addition to your hourly fees." 155:31. I've been spending all the profits on expansion and building, and we might continue to do that. But I want to drive us toward becoming one of the best law firms in Missouri. Meanwhile, we're attorneys, and I want us to continue as we have since I opened for business. We'll handle the smallest claim as well as the large claims. I want us to be good neighbors and good citizens of the community.